What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to talk about my top 10 fantasy football lessons learned from week 13 as we look forward and apply them to week 14 in the fantasy football playoffs. This is where I look through what I believe are the important data trends, usage, nuggets, all the information and stats you need to know moving forward in fantasy football will be here in this video to save you hours of scrolling through box scores. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, and our first takeaway is the rookie receiver report, the world famous rookie receiver report sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000, and there will be a free Jameis Winston 0.5 total yards pick in the pick'em lobby for you. There's going to be a ton of projections for NBA, NFL, all of that good stuff tonight. Every time a new user signs up, you get one of these, whether that's Jameis Winston or whoever's playing in the game that's going on when you sign up. There'll be links in the description and the comment section down below to hook you up and get you onto Underdog. I'm going to be, literally every night, I actually schedule a timer around 6 p.m. to get my 25 NBA drafts in. Just a fun sweat, right? Where NBA is happening, you put $5 in, $10,000 goes to first place. Just there's a ton going on Underdog. Make sure you check it out. But let's get down to brass tacks, all right? The rookie receiver report. We have, as always, these are rookie wide receivers and tight ends with 130-plus routes sorted by their PFF grade. First, you have their route participation over the last 3 weeks. Are they getting on the field and running routes when there are passing plays? Are they a starter in the passing offense? Targets per out run. How much volume are they commanding on a per out basis? Anything over 20% is good. Anything over 25% is elite. Yards per out run. Are they efficient on a per out basis? Anything over 2 is very good. First downs per out run. Are you not only getting big plays, but are you moving the chains of your offense? Anything over 10% is what we're looking for. And then PFF grade. How do you look on film? Anything over 80 is really, really good. Now, you also have this change tab, which is just from last week to this week, how much has their PFF grade increased or decreased? You can see who is trending up or down in a given week. Now, the man of the hour, or actually he played on Friday, and that seems so far away at this point, but Brock Bowers, man, he has exceeded my wildest expectations and dreams. This is really just there's only so much glazing of Brock Bowers I can do here every week, but I do just want to make it clear, just appreciate what we're seeing with Brock Bowers right now. He is at 16.5 points per game. I want to say Laporta had the rookie record for the highest points per game for a rookie tight end, hovering around 14 points per game. Brock Bowers has cleared that. He is now sitting with 16.5 points per game, a massive gap between him and Laporta. And that's no, disservice to Laporta, but what Brock Bowers is doing as a rookie right now is unprecedented. You have to start looking at Mike Ditka in terms of rookie tight ends that are doing anything even remotely like this, because we've seen, Kelsey didn't really do much as a rookie. A lot of these, all-time greats, whether you want to say, all-time great is a little bit much to say for Jimmy Graham or Gronk, but I just mean guys of my generation who scored a lot of fantasy points. They don't do it this early. He's at 16.5 points per game, the best point per game season for a rookie tight end ever. And then if you want to include wide receivers, it's the 10th best point per game season for a rookie wide receiver ever. He is just 0.3 points per game behind Malik Neighbors. He's actually outproducing what Mike Evans did as a rookie. It's nuts. I don't know why I can't speak. Nuts, of course. Pause. But Brock Bowers, 16.4 plus points per game as a rookie. He's had Aiden O'Connell. He's had Gardner Minshew. They've signed Desmond Ridder. I think Desmond Ridder might have gotten a start. It just does not matter. He's inevitable. He has had his second 30-point fantasy game in his last 3 games. So 2 of his last 3, he's been over 30 points. It's just ridiculous. He had 14 targets, 10 catches, 140 yards, a touchdown versus a really, really good Kansas City Spagnuolo defense. So it's insane. His routes are getting ratcheted up. They just don't want to have a passing play where he's not on the field. 97% across the board. Everything is elite. The only rookie receivers in my database with a better PFF grade than this, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham Jr. After that, and I will say as well, I think he's going to be a top 25 redraft pick next year at worst. I know Hayden Winks has been putting out a lot of that energy, and I would agree. And then I think for Dynasty, he's a top 15 pick at worst. So this is him. He's here. Enjoy it while he's here. And I know we're going to talk about Kyle Pitts later. If you have a sour taste in your mouth about Kyle Pitts, about anointing somebody too early, this is not that. This is something that, this is alien-like. It is something we've never seen before. And if there's any discount, again, on a Kyle Pitts, sour taste, I will be all in. Now, after that, we have Malik Neighbors, and we'll just kind of go down the list here. Malik Neighbors, more of the same. It's just tough. This is what it looks like when you have a bad quarterback. He had 13 targets, which is great. 8 catches, 69 yards. He's at 16.7 points per game, and you can see that from this Bowers graphic. That's going to play. For Dynasty long-term, he's in this range of like Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson, of course. He just front-loaded his points, which is the weird part. Things have been bad since, Andrew Thomas got hurt, Daniel Jones got hurt. He's calling out, Dable in the post-game press conferences, but he still looks fine. 16.7 points per game for a rookie is going to be just fine. He did dip under 2 yards per out run, but that's going to happen when your quarterbacks are Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito. Then we have Ladd McConkey, man. Ladd McConkey, if you wanted to make a case of all the rookie wide receivers, if you wanted to have him first moving forward in redraft, first moving forward in Dynasty, I would hear you out. I can't quite get there, but you could certainly make the case that I'm holding on to my priors too much. But Ladd McConkey is, he's in the discussion, whether you want to call him wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He's locked in top 4 at this point. There is no disputing that. Targets per out run looks great. He leads the entire class in yards per out run. He leads the entire class in first downs per out run and has an 80-plus PFF grade. And he now has 3 100-yard receiving games in his last 6 games. So he's just been a monster. Put up a great game yesterday despite the Chargers offense looking terrible. Then we have Brian Thomas. This one's rough. He dips just below 80 PFF grade. I think he'll be fine. But everything else looks good. He's still efficient. He's drawing targets, first downs per out run. It's just that, Trevor Lawrence gets hurt in this one, and then we're back to Mac Jones. So that really sucks. In terms of redraft, that's really not great. Now, Mac Jones has been kind of capable with Brian Thomas Jr., but the Trevor Lawrence, Al-Shire hit thing, brutal stuff because they are positioning for the first overall draft pick. So at this point, they kind of rushed Trevor Lawrence back from a collarbone, shoulder injury. Now he's got a concussion. I just don't know. You pay him all this money. There's only so much you can keep on just kind of trotting him out there in games that don't matter. But Brian Thomas for Dynasty, all in. But you can also see, this is kind of rough. 87 yards and a touchdown. That'll play. That's beautiful stuff. He'll be like a high-end wide receiver 3 with massive upside moving forward. But you can see here from Ian Hartitz, he did have an underthrown 77-yard touchdown, which I think was with Lawrence, which sucks. And then an overthrown 69-yard touchdown, which I believe was with Mac Jones. So lots of fantasy points getting left on the table for Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't doubt the talent. You have, of course, Vele plays tonight. Coker's hurt. Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, there's a lot of talk on the timeline about Marvin Harrison Jr. It does suck, right? Like, he's not producing, he's supposed to be this blue chip guy, and he doesn't look like a Brock Bowers or a Malik Neighbors. And I keep on trying to stress this of, he hasn't, we just had massive expectations for him in redraft. It was very weird with him. I didn't want to be in on him in redraft. And then you look around, and even the home league sites were all over Marvin Harrison Jr., which maybe should have been a warning sign, but also I just found it shocking that Malik Neighbors, you could get huge discount. On Underdog, he was a 2-3 turn pick. Redraft leagues, he was a 4-5 turn pick. And if you got him there, he was a massive steal. There was no discount on Marvin Harrison Jr., which led me to believe maybe we should just treat him as, he's already here. And that was obviously a mistake, right? Redraft expectations were way too high. He needed to finish as a top 15 wide receiver to get there. And he's not even close to those Malik Neighbors, 16.7 points per game on that leaderboard with Brock Bowers. But it's still not terrible. He's still doing all right. He had 12 targets in this game, which is great, but just 5 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. You'd like more efficiency. You would like more. But long-term, I'm really not stressing. He's still, to me, blue chip, no doubter. Moving forward, his first year is going to be strong enough that it's not a concern, right? It's not like a Quentin Johnston first year or a Sky Moore first year or a Kevin White first year. I know some of those guys had injuries, but I'm just talking about guys who were zeros in year one. That's when it's time to panic. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been just fine. You would like more, but it is what it is at this point. There is also some aspect to it where Trey McBride is a much more trusted receiver in this offense. And then also Kyler Murray, with the routes that Marvin Harrison runs downfield as a pure X, it's not going to time up with Kyler Murray and how much he likes to kind of create out of structure and bail on pockets. It's not really what Marvin Harrison Jr. gels with. So the scheme fits a little rough. If you want to draw long-term conclusions of investing in somebody in Dynasty and wanting more of a skill set that's a flanker, yard at the catch role of someone that can just hit the ground running like Malik Neighbors, I'm open to it, right? Because in the past, I've gravitated towards wanting this pure X wide receiver, and unless you're Nico Collins, it's a really high bar to clear to actually be productive in that role, or else you're kind of just running like Alec Pierce, Gabe Davis type of routes, and that's rough. So there's definitely levels to this, but I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will eventually break into that, like Nico Collins, AJ Green type pure X receiver. It's just going to take time. I didn't mean to go on like such a tangent there, but it's week 13, man. This is what you signed up for. I'm going to talk about whatever I please, to be honest. There's going to be timestamps. And I will say as well, you're going to see Travis Hunter in the background. The lights back up. I cleaned the entire basement. I have a jersey collection of probably like 50 jerseys that are all, some of them are super obscure. Some of them aren't. I might just start, because I'm not putting any Jets jerseys up anymore. I might just start putting up random jerseys every day moving forward. We'll see. But let's talk about Rome Odunze. And this is one that I can't be like, all right, just chill. Expectations were too high like I could with Marvin Harrison Jr. Rome Odunze, there's definitely time to start having some concerns, right? Caleb has now had back-to-back games with Thomas Brown where he had 340 passing yards and 256. And what Odunze did in those two games was 5 catches, 39 yards, and then 2 catches, 25 yards. That's not going to cut it. He's still commanding targets, but like these per out, this just isn't going to play. 63 PFF grade's not going to work. Sub 6% first downs per out run, 1.19 yards per out run. Like these are just bad numbers across the board. I'm not a film expert, but the final play by Caleb and the coach, and of course that led to Eberflus getting fired, but it was like a deep shot to Rome Odunze, and he just like didn't even really track it all that well. And he really stuck out on film from people that I respect earlier in the season, and it's not quite there anymore. Now, I don't know. There's a wide range here. He's not producing, like he's, for me, clearly like wide receiver 5 in this class at this point, right? Behind Neighbors, behind McConkey, behind Thomas, behind Marv. Then I would have Rome, and I'm not panicking just yet. And if you want to have some, copium here, this was good from Jacob Gibbs. Only 24 of 113 air yards were catchable for Rome Odunze in week 13. The thing he's quote tweeting, only 15 of 104 Rome Odunze air yards were deemed catchable in week 12. On the year, only Calvin Ridley has more uncatchable air yards than Odunze. Then it says, my eyes tell me this is mostly on Rome, but of both, arguably Caleb's least accurate game according to the FP data charting. So do with that what you will, whether you believe, like it is a little tough. It's like, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are getting there. Can we build an excuse for Rome Odunze? I don't know. It's not a perfect situation, but he's clearly a tier behind those other 4 is really all you can say. And for redraft, you were hoping for him to produce down the stretch. He's running the routes. The production just hasn't been there. I'm still holding out some hope, but I'm not putting him in my lineup until I see anything. But we can get to Xavier Worthy, who I probably called dead too early. All right. He is now at 45 or more receiving yards in each of his last 3 games. Before that, he hit 45 or more receiving yards just twice in his 9 previous games. So he now has more 45-yard games over his last 3 than he did in his first 9. So they're making a point to get him involved. He's looking a little bit better. He's still the kind of like part-time player where they're having this deep rotation, but that's good. He's being efficient. He's not running every route, but he's still, getting his targets, producing. He's now 1.1 yards per run. Like, it's not amazing. He's improved his PFF grade 2.4, one of the highest of the week. So he's trending in the right direction. But in redraft, he's not startable. In Dynasty, he's showing some life. Then we have A.D. Mitchell. This one was sad. High hopes with Josh Downs out. Clearly, he's probably much better as a Pittman replacement than a pure slot. It doesn't seem like they want him out there for the entire, diet of slot snaps at this point. Just 60% of the routes, it's not going to cut it. And then he did just run 15 routes, 2 targets, 0 catches, 1 brutal drop. Probably his worst game so far, which is really disappointing because last time that Pittman was out and he sort of inherited that role, he looked really good. The per out numbers here still are going to look good, but you hate to see him not take advantage of an opportunity. Then you have Xavier Legette. Bryce Young looks great, but Legette hasn't really gotten there yet. 4 catches, 53 yards. He did have 8 targets, which is nice, but it was a game where Bryce Young had like 46 pass attempts. I think that Tommy Tremble had 8 targets. I think David Moore had 9. I think Adam Thielen had 10. So he's still, Bryce Young, and I don't blame him for this, is still really putting a lot of his trust in the veterans. Adam Thielen, David Moore, Tommy Tremble. Super impressive stuff from Bryce Young. Like, his receiving room is weak, very weak. And he's going, like, he's battling every week, and he looks better than I could have ever imagined. Then we have Ricky Pearsall. This one's tough. Ricky Pearsall looks dead. I don't know. We talked about this the entire season, but he's coming off of a bullet wound. If you want to say, well, I am going to just if you want to not waive this entire season for Ricky Pearsall and say, it was just a red shirt, you certainly can. But for a first-round pick who's seeing his routes uptick every week, he has 3 straight games with 0 yards, despite getting maybe like 3 targets over that stretch. So he's not really commanding volume. He's not being efficient. He's not producing anything right now. Across the board, everything looks really, really rough for Pearsall. Then we can also talk about Theo Johnson. That's our last guy I want to touch on here. This one sucks. He gets up to an 86% of the routes. He has his best game as a pro. He increases the PFF grade by 5.3. He gives you 5 catches, 54 yards, 3 missed tackles forced on the game. Like, he was just trucking dudes in this game, and then season-ending injury. He's an interesting stash in Dynasty, but I just wanted to give him some flowers because I do feel bad about how that kind of played out for him. But let's move on to the rest of the 10 lessons learned here. And our second takeaway is that Jonathon Brooks is showing some signs of life, right? We just kind of touched on the Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young, and Chuba Hubbard kind of opened the door for John Brooks to get involved. Now, Jonathon Brooks didn't do anything crazy. He goes from 9% of the snaps to 21%. It's not a steep enough climb to want to even start him next week, but it's good. He's climbing up. I don't know if you want to call it the depth chart, but they're just trusting him more to take some of the carries. This is a good chart by PFF where you can see 54 snaps for Chuba Hubbard, 14 for just Jonathon Brooks, and Jonathon Brooks got both of the goal line snaps, which is really good. We want the goal line, and we want the passing down stuff. The issue is that the passing down stuff, right, third downs, 2-minute drills, all went to Chuba Hubbard. So Chuba Hubbard's still the main back. He's getting all of the touches. He's getting all of the passing down work. It's a little weird, though, because they split 50-50 in terms of short yardage, but goal line, it was Jonathon Brooks. So I don't really know what that means. It is interesting that they had some, even though Jonathon Brooks wasn't out there for the third downs or 2-minute drill snaps, he was schemed up in the passing game with 3 targets, 3 catches, 23 yards, one of them like a nice explosive play. So that's fun. They're trying to get him involved. They're trying to get him touches. He had 9 touches in this game to Chuba Hubbard's. I want to say Chuba Hubbard just had 12 touches, and Chuba Hubbard had a back-breaking fumble late in this game. So he has completely opened the door for Jonathon Brooks. I would say big downgrade on Chuba Hubbard. As someone that, a lot of the 0RB, hero RB guys we've been riding all season long. If there was ever a time for, whether it's a passing of the baton or a takeover, it would be now, right? 12 for 43 on the ground and a fumble. That's not going to get it done in the National Football League. So we'll see how that goes. We could even see something as soon as like a 60-40 split in favor of Hubbard in this next game versus Eagles. Just something to make sure you're monitoring as we move forward. Then on the other side of that game, our third takeaway is that Bucky Irving could be a league winner this year, man. He has been a monster. I will say, I'll put my hand up and say that when we were recommending trade targets a few weeks ago, I recommended Rachaad White as the Bucs headed into their bye week. I figured Bucky Irving would be more expensive and it'd be like a 50-50 split. Why not just bet on one of them? Well, I went against my own rule. We talk about rookies being league winners down the stretch and getting more snaps and getting better as they go. And that's been the case for Bucky Irving, man. He has now had 27.4 points per game over his last 2 games behind just Saquon Barkley. This is a graphic from Next Gen Stats. The caption is from the 33rd team. And pretty much, he had a career high last week of 88 rushing yards. This week, he resets that at 152. And it's just monstrous. Now, on the bottom, you can see despite a 4-game losing streak that started in Week 7, the Buccaneers started to find their run game. That's right around when they lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Since that time, Tampa Bay has been 3rd in total EPA on runs and EPA per play with the 4th lowest stuff rate. So they're really finding their run game. Liam Cohen, a great play caller there. So Bucky Irving could very easily be the guy you need to, fend off Saquon down the stretch here. I thought this was a good tweet by Ryan Heath as well. He puts the usage in perspective. He set career highs in backfield carry share, rush attempts of 25, rushing yards, fantasy points. He also led the backfield in targets over each of his past 2 games. It's his backfield. And I would say, it's wheels up. He's the RB18 in points per game at 14.2, despite kind of being not even the starting running back until maybe this week. So that's huge. And again, if you need one guy to survive Saquon in week 16 or 17, it could be Bucky. I went back and checked out their playoff schedule here. Vegas this week's about neutral. The Chargers is going to be tough week 15, but week 16 versus Dallas, week 17 versus Carolina are 2 beautiful matchups for Bucky Irving. Now, speaking of running backs that disappointed, I hate having to face the music on the Jets, man. The biggest lesson, man, so the lesson here is just Jets running back room, and we'll talk about some Kenneth Walker stuff, but I don't know. Hindsight's 2020, but there was certainly always something fishy about the Jets having 2 first-round picks in fantasy football. I just feel bad. I just feel like I have to keep on being I feel like I have to answer for all of these, mishaps the Jets do in terms of our fantasy assets. And Breece Hall came into this game with an injury. So that was always something known and something that we downgraded him for in the rankings. I had him as like a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, and that still wasn't harsh enough. Connor Hughes, a Jets reporter, said that he was expected to play, but it was very much in doubt before then. He suffered a pretty significant knee injury against the Colts, much more than the team let on. Initial thought was he'd miss a few weeks. Testament to Hall that he was able to fight back to play, not miss time, which I guess is cool, but at the same time, it's a lost season. Sit out if you got to sit out. But that sucks. Like Breece Hall, what he gave you in this game, he fumbled, but he's now had like 6 fumbles this year, which is something else that's very weird with him. In a year when we need him to not get negative points for certain plays, it sucks because coming off of like a 31.1 point game, his best game of the year against the Colts, gets a bye, should be fresh. Seattle defense isn't anything crazy. He gives you 12 carries for 60 yards, but he fumbles. He gets taken off the field, which is really not great. Now, this thing in the left-hand corner is the Fantasy Life utilization report, and I just wanted to kind of show how his role changed in this game, right? Week 10, 82% of the snaps, 11, 85% of the snaps, and then week 13 down to 61% of the snaps. And you can see that got taken away in terms of touches as well, where his rush attempt percentage went from 84% to 60%, his routes went from 73% to 52%, and his targets down from 25% to 5%. So less touches, less routes, less snaps. And the biggest bummer is for everybody out there that has been holding Braylon Allen as the handcuff, I don't think it's going to be as cut and dry as we would think, right? If Bijan goes down, Tyler Algier is a bell cow, 20 touches, fire him the hell up. But it's not going to be this cut and dry. Isaiah Davis, who we loved out of South Dakota State, I was pissed off on drafted that the Jets drafted him because they had Breece Hall. They then drafted Braylon Allen. They already had Isiah Benaconda. And then they draft Isaiah Davis, a really fun prospect I was very excited about to just bury him on the depth chart. But now they want to use him. He scored like this end-around touchdown. They used him in the 2-minute drill. And you can see Braylon Allen in a game where Breece Hall's snaps went down about, 20 to 25%. Braylon Allen snaps only went up 5%, right? 24% in week 10, 17% in week 11, then 29% in week 13. His rush attempt share was 41% in week 10, just 25% in week 13. So not like a massive change for him despite Breece Hall having some limitations. So Isaiah Davis actually goes from 2% of the snaps in week 10, inactive for a while, comes back 18% of the snaps. And the big thing here is that 45% long down and distance snaps. This is a spot where they don't really trust Braylon Allen yet to be out there as the pass-catching back. And I think what we would see is if Breece Hall misses time, because it seems like that's up in the air. He retweaked his knee as well during the game. If he misses any time, Braylon Allen becomes like a fringe RB2, like a back-end RB2, kind of like what Gus Edwards is for the Chargers. And then Isaiah Davis would just be this annoying pass-catching specialist, probably hovering around like 30 to 40% of the snaps, coming in there for short down and distance, 2-minute drill, all of that. So downgrade for Breece, downgrade for Braylon Allen. I'm not saying to drop Braylon Allen, but you definitely, if you have a hierarchy of handcuffs, he gets a huge downgrade now that we've kind of seen what their plan would be if Breece Hall can't go. And on the other side, Kenneth Walker has been letting us down for the past few weeks. Ryan Heath puts it here. Kenneth Walker just had his 5th straight game above a 72% backfield carry share, which should be good. But this was also his 5th consecutive game of failing to reach 14 PPR points. And I wrote down, he's the RB10 in points per game on the season, but he hasn't hit 15 or more PPR points since week 7. It's been brutal to have Kenneth Walker in fantasy at this point. Walker was stuffed inside the 5 twice. This led to the Seahawks to give Zach Charbonnet their next 2 carries inside the 10. One was negated by a penalty, and the other resulted in the game-winning touchdown. So he might have just lost his goal line role. He hasn't been efficient enough to really maintain this massive workhorse bell cow type of role they've been giving him. So downgrade for Kenneth Walker as well. Pretty brutal. And then we also have some more bad news for running backs. You have McCaffrey. Now, this is where we get really in the weeds. All right, shout out Kay Adams. She had on Ed McCaffrey today. She had on Ed McCaffrey, which I'm stumbling over because I can't even really believe. What a crazy guest to have on the night after his son has like an injury in front of the entire world. That was pretty devastating. But he comes on, and I'm just reading the quotes here. On the bottom, he confirms it's a PCL strain. He'll get an MRI. As of the time I'm making this video, we still don't know how long he'll be out, if at all. I would assume a few weeks. But the interesting part is that he said if he's ready to go, he'll go. And I actually believe that. If you hear, now again, we're getting in the weeds here. But whenever McCaffrey brings up his childhood and everything, because Ed McCaffrey was a pro, he's very old school, where like he didn't like McCaffrey missing time for high school games. He would have him on like IVs as like a 16-year-old kid, and they would work crazy. So it wouldn't shock me at all if McCaffrey isn't the kind of guy. And I think that this narrative is honestly often overblown of like, oh, well, what if it's week 16 and they're out of the playoffs? Are they just going to shut down all their good players? Usually, no. A lot of these guys are more prideful than that, and they do suit up anyways. It's more when it's like money involved. McCaffrey's already paid, so I could see him suiting back up. But the thing to really note here is not Kay Adams or anything like that. It's just that he's probably going to miss some time. The 49ers running back is now opened up onto the market here, and it does suck. I will add again, McCaffrey had 7 carries for 53 yards. He was looking really good. 2 catches, 14 yards. He looked right on pace to be really good last night, and then, of course, he gets hurt. But in his absence, we have Jordan Mason into the rescue. Dave Richard tweets here, after the CMC injury, Jordan Mason had 67% of the snaps, 6 of 8 of the third downs. Isiah Guerrero 33% with the inside the 10 snap. Now, Jordan Mason had 13 carries, 78 rushing yards, no targets, and to me ends up as like an easy RB2 in any game that McCaffrey misses. And you'll probably be like, if I had to guess the guy in the thumbnail for tomorrow's waiver wire video, I have to kind of think through who else that could be. But he was dropped in a lot of leagues, right? McCaffrey comes back. He looks fine. Isiah Guerrero kind of like outshines Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason's out there on waivers. He has some league-winning upside down the stretch. We'll see how that goes. But I do think that he should be rostered. Now, some more running back stuff. We have the Washington game. This was Austin Ekeler. He is out on the IR with, I want to say it was a concussion. So he's going to be out for 4 weeks. After yesterday, he's going to have a bye, and then he'll be out 2 more weeks. So we'll have 2 weeks of this kind of usage. Now, I will say, of course, the Commanders killed the Titans. They won by $1 billion, it seemed like. But I think talking about their running back usage is still important here, where Bijan Robinson had 17.9 PPR points. He probably could have played more, but he was coming off of his own ankle injury, which will now heal up off of after the bye. And then also they were up by $1 billion, so he didn't really need to play a whole ton. But he had 16 carries, 103 yards, a touchdown, a catch, and 6 yards. He looked great. And with Ekeler staying out those extra 2 games, that'll be week 15, week 16. Bijan Robinson could be a monster down the stretch here. Now, I will say, I was kind of excited for Jeremy McNichols in our waiver wire video. I think you're probably better off just not starting any of these guys moving forward outside of Bijan Robinson. Of course, game script played into it, right, where they're up a ton. Rodriguez is more of their bruiser to McNichols being more of their pass-catching back, but that ended up in 23 snaps for Rodriguez, 21 snaps for McNichols, 10 routes for McNichols, 6 carries for McNichols, to 7 routes for Rodriguez, which is less than McNichols, but more carries. He scored the touchdown, Rodriguez. Neither are really startable. I guess, gun to my head, I would start leaning Chris Rodriguez, but that would only be in games that Washington is favored by. And even then, both are very, very slim. So nothing really left on the bone in that Washington backfield unless both Ekeler and B-Rob are healthy. With Ekeler down, just more of an upgrade to B-Rob than it is like, okay, we can start somebody else in this backfield. And then on the other side, I wanted to talk about their backfield. Tony Pollard. This is a tweet from JJ Zacharyson. Tyjae Spears was back from a concussion, but Tony Pollard still dominated snaps 14-14. Pollard has seen his 2 highest running back rush shares of the season over his last 2 games. So despite having 8.8 PPR points for Pollard, it was a brutal game. They got killed. It wasn't a rushing game script, but this was huge because in games with Spears, it had been like a 50-50 split. It seems like Pollard has earned being the, top dog, 75% type of snap guy. So we'll see what that looks like moving forward as we head on and as Spears gets healthier from the concussion. There's a chance that they were just easing Spears back in. There's also a chance that Pollard has now just really created some separation. And they get Jacksonville this week, a defense that has been brutal pretty much all around. Then we have the Chargers game. Similar story. Ekeler goes on IR. Dobbins goes on IR. The 2 big stories over the weekend, or I don't know if you want to call them big stories, but the 2 things that happened. So Dobbins will not be here for at least another minimum 3 games. But let's talk about their running backs. Now, of course, the Chargers, they didn't score a single offensive touchdown. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I want to say it was a pick six, and it was just a bunch of field goals. I could be wrong there, but I believe that's how the game went down. And we look at the running backs here from the Fantasy Life utilization report. You can see it wasn't super pretty. You had 52% of the snaps go to Gus Edwards, just 35% of the rush attempts. I want to say that the rush attempts account for Herbert, right? Because like Vidal 24, Gus 35, plus Haskins 6 is not going to add up to 100. He was the leader in the clubhouse. He had 7 opportunities. Kamani Vidal had 4 opportunities. Haskins, I mean, he's getting charity snaps because he played with Harbaugh in Michigan. I can't shut up about this, but he has no business being out there. He had 1 opportunity. His 1 opportunity, he fumbled. He's been used on the goal line where he gets stuffed, and then they bring in Gus Edwards to actually do the dirty work. But this is very clearly, to me, a 2-man backfield between Kamani Vidal and Gus Edwards. Haskins is just very annoying that he gets on the field or gets any opportunities in general. But 7 for Edwards, 4 for Vidal. Vidal was more efficient, but he was not. I was expecting him to be a guy who ran more routes than Gus Edwards and played on more of those long down and distance 2-minute drill snaps. That was not the case. That was actually Hassan Haskins again, which is insane considering Haskins has never in his life been a pass catching back. You had 4 carries for 20 yards for Kamani Vidal. Would have been cool, in a game where they struggled to get things going offensively. Why not run the ball with Vidal a little more? But I mean, 6 carries for 32 yards for Gus Edwards is also over 5 yards per carry. So I don't know. I don't know. I didn't watch much of the Falcons Chargers game. I'll be honest. I don't know why they didn't just go to the run game a little bit more, but that's where they're at. Gus Edwards is he's like an RB3 moving forward, and Kamani Vidal is still a stash. Now, let's have a tough conversation. Let's have a real tough conversation. I have always been a Kyle Pitts guy, but it's probably time to let go. Sam Sherman writes here, and I think that there's a lot of signs with Kyle Pitts of, I don't know. It takes a long time for tight ends to produce sometimes. We talked about, up top when we talked about Bowers, how usually these guys do take some time. And you would think heading into this is like year 4 now for Pitts. This could have been the year. First time he has an actual quarterback, an actual offensive coordinator who doesn't hate him. But maybe, looking back now, a lot of us thought, why were they using Jonnu Smith? Well, because Jonnu Smith is actually really good at football. I'll be the first one to admit. I think that's probably just what it was. So this sucks. Pitts is also... I liked him a ton because he commanded targets on a high rate per route downfield. So he didn't need yards after the catch. I don't know why I can't. Yards after the catch because he was getting a lot of yards before the catch on huge ADOTs his entire career. That's why he had more receiving yards as a rookie than Sam Laporta did. Laporta just had more touchdowns. But I don't know. It's tough. There is something to be said about tight ends where you can't just be... I mean... This is gonna sound crazy, but he's almost like Alec Pierce as a tight end. That's kind of like when you look at his usage and stuff. That's kind of what it boils down to. He's not going to be an alpha target share earner next to Drake London in them. It's just really rough. It's a lot of sort of facing reality. There was some question mark there where he had a knee injury the year before. Year 1 looked really good. A lot of context mixed in, but point blank, he was a brutal pick. That's really all there is to be said. I'm trying to think because his archetype, him and Bowers, I made a post on Twitter when Bowers first came out, and Pitts he's such a fine line to thread that I wish that I factored in more. I do actually want to see if I can pull up the tweet because he does nothing in terms of and this was a good tweet that Sherman had as well, who I'm showing here, but it was a different tweet he had talking about, well, everyone always says Marvin Harrison Jr., why can't you just give him more of the layups and the easy stuff you give to McBride? Well, it's because he's not a yards after the catch guy. He's not a missed tackles force guy. He's not a running back, whereas that's what Bowers was. So with Kyle Pitts, it was this weird situation. This is what it was. So when you look at how they profiled coming out of school, and like I said, we're getting to a point of the year, fellas, where I'm just kind of ranting about whatever I want to talk about here and just kind of talking into an open forum. But this is why I loved Bowers so much and why I was very much just draft Bowers. And I will say, I don't think I even drafted enough Bowers. I drafted a lot of him. He was more expensive on Underdog. He was somebody that we talked about, when we did all of these guys are way too cheap on ESPN, these guys are way too cheap on Yahoo. It was always Bowers. And I hope that a lot of you, let me know. If you're out there, you watch that video and draft Bowers because of it, let me know. But this is one of the big reasons why I thought he could hit the ground running even with a bad quarterback. 8.2 ADOT. So he doesn't have to get open downfield, right? And some of these quarterbacks, they bail on stuff. Like we talked about with Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. He might not wait in the pocket long enough for an 11.8 yard ADOT often enough for fantasy, goodness. Missed tackles forced per reception, 25%. 19 carries, 193 yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns in college, 8.5 yak per reception. So he's very much this guy that you just have to get him the ball. Just get him the ball. Kyle Pitts, though, you need him to get downfield, catch, and then fall, which is fine. And he's getting efficiency in a different way, but it's so much tougher. You know what I mean? It's so much tougher where the catch rate downfield goes down. He has to get open, and not only get open, but we're playing in a modern NFL now where if you were watching Bowers, like he was cooking up like corners and safeties. So it's no longer Kyle Pitts getting SEC linebackers. He's getting DBs in the NFL. And maybe at a certain point in the offseason, I would have been open to the idea that he could beat those guys in the NFL, but he's just not that guy. So now we have this like specialist unicorn who can't block, but then he also can't beat DBs on routes, and he has to be, he has to create separation and get open 12, 13, 14 yards downfield. So you're just like threading this parlay for Kyle Pitts that is really rough. So this is just kind of like almost like a funeral for Kyle Pitts, man. This is the point of no return for him. I'm not saying it's completely over. There's guys out there that take forever, right? David Njoku was this way. I love David Njoku coming out. It took him like 4, 5, 6 years. So we're done spending premium picks on Kyle Pitts. We can still hope, cost adjusted, but he is not the guy we thought in terms of like blue chip, can't miss, no sir. And that's why I was hesitant to, that's why there was, in my RS grades in terms of my prospect model, I don't have elites or legendaries for tight ends because these guys we've seen before, right? Like, who are some guys that have been drafted highly as a tight end, right? We've seen like Vernon Davis was good, don't get me wrong, but he's not a Hall of Famer. Eric Ebron's another one. There's a lot of these tight ends that get drafted early in the top 10. There's a reason why, Gronk was a 2nd-round pick. Kelsey was a 3rd-round pick. Kittle was a 5th-round pick. I think Tony Gonzalez was a 1st-rounder. I think Antonio Gates was not a 1st-rounder. So you think about like the greatest tight ends of all time, and they're usually more project than they are like best player of all time, unless your name is Brock Bowers. Now back to Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts in week 8, 4 catches, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. Since then, 6 catches, 75 yards, 0 touchdowns. He's been brutal. Per Nate Yonke here, Pitts played just 40% of the snaps and ran just 63% of the routes in week 13. If that usage is sticky, it's over. And I agree. Like, if you need to drop him in the fantasy playoffs, if you are starting guys like Tucker Kraft over him or Hunter Henry over him, I wouldn't blame you. And if you need a roster spot to just like hold the handcuff on your bench, you absolutely can. And this is kind of like where I stick the fork in it for Kyle Pitts. I paused it on accident, but he's now in the Noah Fant career trajectory. Through a tight end's 56 career games, he has 491.9 PPR points. Noah Fant was in that same exact range, 479.5, and I'm still waiting for the Noah Fant breakout. So, brutal, disappointed, and you can drop him if you need to. Now, after that, we have, in this same game, on the positive side, Bijan Robinson is doing everything that I, dreamed that Breece Hall could maybe do. Bijan Robinson, fantasy usage, this is from Hayden Winks, just sort of breaking down touches, goal line opportunities, all of that. How many fantasy points should he have put up in terms of half PPR? 25.1. He is getting a ton of volume. He's at 22.7 points per game since week 6 behind just Saquon. I couldn't tell you what changed in week 6, but since then I have this red line there, 25, 23, 23, 21, 29, then 10, then a bye, then 25. He has been a monster. Of course, Saquon gets all the shine. He should. He's in MVP conversations right now. But Bijan is the RB2 rest of season for me, with his own little gap to the next guy. And he's really distancing himself from Tyler Algier. He's had all of the inside the 5 carries over the last 2 weeks. They're done messing around with Algier at the goal line. And that's beautiful stuff. Now, some more backfield stuff. We have Pacheco. He has his debut. He returns from injury here. And he doesn't completely seize the backfield, right? 33% of the snaps to 40% for Kareem Hunt. I think there was a lot of Pirine in there as well. Pacheco had 8 opportunities, 6.3 yards per carry. The juice was there. I think that's the biggest part is off of this injury that can sometimes zap athleticism. I want to say it's a similar injury to what Tony Pollard had coming into last year, where this injury can just wreak havoc on these players' explosiveness. That didn't seem to be the case for Pacheco. Still a small sample of 8 opportunities, but he did run well. 11 opportunities for Kareem Hunt. He had just 3.5 PPR points. I think that they are dying to get away from using Kareem Hunt as much as they do. They're going to ramp up Pacheco, and he could be a potential like league winner down the stretch, Isiah Pacheco. So something to definitely monitor, keep an eye on. I think that was a positive game for him, but I would keep him out of my lineup if I can. Like, he's going to be like an RB3 until we see his snap share get to like 60%. Then our last takeaway is the Rico Dowdle takeover. Brutal brutal stuff for him to get this usage after the Dak injury. But nonetheless, he gives you 22 carries on Thanksgiving, 112 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 11 yards versus the Giants. He now has back-to-back games that you can see here from the Fantasy Life utilization report of 70% or more of the rush attempts, which is great. He's had 20 or more touches in each of his last 2 games. You can see him here as well in the fantasy usage stuff. He's behind, he's 9th there. So he was an RB1 in terms of usage this week. That is all really good. He's like a nice RB2 heading into the fantasy playoffs, but this was the Giants, a really easy matchup. Things get a little bit tougher for him from here on out. I think he has the Eagles in week 17. Not great, but if you've been searching for an RB2 all year, he's somebody you can put in there and feel fine about in terms of him getting the usage. Now, that is going to do it for us today. As always, that was our top 10 lessons learned for fantasy football. I will say, weird week this week, or just weird moving forward because we don't have trade targets to do anymore, right? Fantasy football trade targets is done. I can talk about, let me know down below what you guys want to hear about. I can talk about rest of season rankings for redraft. I can talk about playoff schedules. I can talk about what does the 2025 first round look like right now. We can get into Dynasty, where I could talk through some 2025 guys. If you guys want to get into like Ashton Genty and Tet McMillan and those guys, the world is our oyster here. Again, I could just do like rest of season rankings as well. I'm open to whatever. Probably will be like a 4-video week. We'll see how it goes. But regardless, leave a like, subscribe, check out Underdog Fantasy as always, and I will see y'all for the waiver wire video tomorrow.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.